A very good evening to all of you. Thanks for joining us on this weekend. I hope all of you gain at least something from today's session. First of all, I would like to thank our panelists, Priyank, Mayank, Sabyasachi, and Shagun, for taking out valuable time from their busy schedules. Priyank and Mayank, especially you, thanks for joining us. I hope we get a very interactive session. So at the very outset, I just want to know how many of you are Jamboree students. So if you are a Jamboree student, can you raise your hands? Okay, great. So we got quite a few Jamboree students. All right. Good to note that you are a Jamboree student. Those of you who are not a Jamboree student, can you type in no in the chat window? So those of you who are not enrolled with Jamboree for anything, please type in no in the chat window. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for your responses. So at the very outset, I would like to request Priyank to introduce himself to the audience today.
Sure, thank you, RMO. Thank you very much. Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. This is Priyank Mehta. I represent an organization called Avance Financial Services. Working with Avance from November 2018, I head the education loan product for them. Been working almost 13 years across quite a few banks in my past tenures. Work with some companies like Standard Chartered Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, ICICI Bank, to name a few of them. And yes, here I am. I hope this session is pretty useful to you. And just like you, even I'm able to get some kind of learning out of this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Priyank. Mayank, all of us would like to know a little bit about you.
Sure. This is Mayank from Prodigy Finance. I have basically joined Prodigy Finance pretty recently, just about a few months ago, and I am responsible for global growth. So just India being one of the focus markets. Besides that, also looking at other key markets for growth opportunities. In terms of background, I basically, prior to Prodigy, I was, let's say, dabbling on my own venture. Which was again in a fintech space, consumer lending. And prior to that, I was heading a venture for Rocket Internet in India, which was called Global Savings Group, if you might have heard about it. I basically have completed my MBA from IESE Business School in Barcelona. And prior to that, I was doing mostly consulting work across USA, Singapore, Germany, and obviously Barcelona, India. In terms of undergraduate studies, I did my bachelor's from IIT BHU back in 2004 in civil engineering. So that's a quick background. And yeah, very excited to be part of this panel. Thank you, Jamboree, for organizing this. And I look forward to an engaging session and maybe helping you guys along the way.
Thanks, Priyank. Thanks, Mayank. So from the Jamboree team, I am Orzuma. And I have been counseling students for admissions and training for the verbal portion of GMAT, GRE, etc. since 2007. So that's been a while. So because I have been around for so many years, I have worn multiple hats. So I have got multiple responsibilities, but counseling and teaching are some of the things that I enjoy the most. With me, I have Sabyasachi. He is my colleague at Jamboree. Sabyasachi, would you like to tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, Miss Saikia, thank you. And guys, I hope you're doing fine. So I am a geoscience graduate from IIT Kharagpur. And then I went on to do my postdoctoral work, and I've traveled the globe in terms of scientific work, and I've worked with different levels with scientists. And with Jamboree, it's very keen enough that from a completely academic venture to doing something close to very academic, and this stays close to my heart, and I take care of masters and PhD students, and over the course of time we will discuss more. Thank you guys. Good day.
Thanks, Sabyasachi. Shagun, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shagun. I'm a business management graduate, and post that I am a Young India fellow with a postgraduate in liberal studies. And post that I have been working with Jamboree Education as a program manager, and I help students with their master's applications. And I really look forward to a very engaging and interactive session.
So Shagun and Sabyasachi handle a lot of our students. Lot of our students enroll in our admissions counseling program. So they help them with university selection, scholarship decisions, things like, you know, which colleges to apply to if they want scholarship. So they manage a lot of those things. So, and over the years, they have handled quite a few students, and a lot of the students have got admissions abroad with scholarships. So that's why they have been invited to join the panel today. All right. So the very outset, so there are some of you who are not Jamboree students. So just a very brief introduction about Jamboree for those of you. So we are a primarily study abroad focused company. We don't do anything else. We don't do CAT or GATE. We only do GMAT, GRE, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, all the exams necessary if you want to study abroad. We have 39 physical locations, and we have very strong online presence. That's why when the whole COVID-19 thing hit, when everything went went into lockdown, we were able to smoothly transition our business from a center business to an online business. Our classes have been going on smoothly online without any interruptions, and our faculties are trained to teach both physically in a classroom, also in the online mode. We have presence in 22 cities across 4 countries. In addition to India, we have offices in Singapore, Nepal, and UAE. Right? This is especially targeted at the students who are not Jamboree students. So if you want a free trial class, if you want a free demo class for GRE or GMAT, please drop your number in the chat. We will have it arranged for you. And some of you who may be enrolled with Jamboree for coaching, but probably have not tried out the admissions counseling services, if you want a free profile evaluation session about how good your profile is for getting scholarships, etc., etc., if you want a profile analysis session with any of our counselors, please leave your number. So we'll get back to you, and like in a week or so, and then we'll handle all your queries. So this is applicable for both students who are not Jamboree students yet, and the Jamboree students who are probably going through the training program but not started any interaction with for the admissions counseling program. All right. So so keep putting your phone numbers throughout the session. We will be collecting them, so it's not that you will get only one opportunity. Moving on, some basic rules during the session. Please do not type your questions in the chat window while we are speaking. We will have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end, where I will be giving you mic access so that you can ask your questions. So we will have that towards the end. So first, let us finish whatever we want to say. Let us finish our portion of the information. Then we will be taking up your questions. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to you by Tuesday. So all the attendees, you will be getting the recording by Tuesday. So sit back, take in the information. At any point of time, if you want to take screenshots, you are more than welcome to take screenshots. But again, I will have to request you not to type your questions in the chat. All right. Today we'll try to cover some of these things, different scholarship types. What are the factors that impact universities' decisions regarding scholarships? And more importantly, how you can improve your chances of getting scholarships. And of course, we will be talking a lot about funding options, other funding options, in case you are not able to manage to get a scholarship. Ultimately, you cannot plan an education thinking that you will get a scholarship, because a scholarship is never a 100% guarantee. So you should always have plan Bs. So what are the other funding options? So you will hear in detail about some of those options from Priyank and Mayank, who are on the panel today. So this is what we plan to cover. Before anything, so I just want to talk about some of the language that you will see in the university websites. So if you have started looking at universities, if you have started looking at what kind of money you have to budget, etc., etc., if you are going through the fee information on a university website, then you will encounter some of this language. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what this language means. So in-state fee. So if you see, on the university websites, you will see fees under two categories, in-state and out-state. So in-state is primarily for the domestic students. So if you are an Indian passport holder, you don't pay in-state fee. So the applicable fee for you is out-state fee, right? And very often, if in-state fee is X, then out-state fee tends to be about 4X. In some cases, it can be 3.5x also. So it's 3.5 times to 4 times more than the in-state fees. And this is what is applicable for international students, right? And when you again go through university websites, sometimes the fee information is not that clear. You will see language such as, X dollars, something dollars, X dollars, let's say, per credit hour. I'm sure you will be seeing this language. Now, what does this mean? So credit hour is something based on which fees is calculated. It just means that those are the number of hours of classes you will be taking a week. So as an international student, you have to enroll for a minimum of 9 credit hours in a semester. So any amount that you see X, so the calculation for you, if you want to calculate how much ultimately the fees you have to pay in a year, so you have to take this X, X multiplied by 9, because as an international student you have to take minimum 9 credit hours. And in the US there are 2 semesters and a smaller summer semester, right? So you it's like a 2.5 semester. So this would be your calculation. This would be the formula that you should use. So whenever in a university website the fees is given in terms of credit hours, so, and you don't know now what it means, so this is the formula you should apply to get an idea about what is the budget you should be thinking about, right? So this is per year. Now if you want the calculation for the whole degree, how much you need to spend per degree, then if this is a year, then multiply it by 2, right? So this will be the cost of your entire entire master's degree, right? So this calculation, understanding what the language means, it will help you calculate how much money you should have for the fees and cost of living, etc., etc. All right. Now, what are the different scholarships and financial aid situations available for international students? First is this is the most common type of financial aid available for international students, right? The Indian students. The most of the information that I will be talking about today would be applicable to Indian students. Whenever there is any variation, I will let you know. So unless otherwise stated, the information is primarily focused at Indian students, because I'm assuming that 90% of you hold Indian passports, right? All right, so the most common types of financial aid given out by universities, something called assistantships. So as the name suggests, you assist the university with something, you help the university with something. So teaching, now what do you help with? Teaching, research, and graduate. So there are 3 different types of assistantships available. If you get hired as a teaching assistant, then you will be helping a professor with his classes, maybe like grading the homework, grading tests, proctoring tests for the faculty, etc., etc. So there's a teaching assistant. If you get hired by the university as a research assistant, I mean, if you get a research assistantship, then you will be helping a professor with his research, right? And graduate assistantship is a kind of like a miscellaneous kind of tasks you'll be doing. Sometimes it may mean that you will be like a lab assistant for different experiments, or maybe you will be asked to make the website for a professor maybe. So graduate assistantships, the tasks that they do are kind of miscellaneous, whereas for teaching and research assistants, it's very clear what kind of tasks you will be expected to do if you are given this assistantship, right? So you do some work and in return for that, the university pays you. So it's as simple as that. And this is the most common type of financial aid being given out by universities. And among these three also, now among these three types of assistantship also, the most common type is this, and then this. Teaching assistantship is very rare. So the most common type is this. Graduate assistantship is second most common, and the least common is the teaching assistantship. But if once you go to the university, you may have to take up some of their own language test, spoken language test. And if you qualify, then I have seen international students being, getting hired as teaching assistants once they go there as well. Right? So they don't rely on the TOEFL or the IELTS test. You have to pass their own speaking assessment to be able to be like hired as a teaching assistant, right? But the other two are fair game. You can get these. Now, the good thing about these assistantships is that they're very, very, very often combined with fee waivers. So if you, let's say, get, a teaching assistantship of, or let's say research assistantship of X dollars, a stipend kind of thing, X dollars per semester, then you automatically, remember I had talked to you about in-state and out-state fees. You pay in-state. So the moment you get an assistantship, the fees, the tuition that you pay will also come down to an in-state fee. Right? So that is a massive advantage. You are getting a stipend, plus you will end up now paying the in-state fee, not the out-state fee. So your fees gets reduced by, you pay 25% of the fee almost, right? So that's a massive advantage if you can manage to get an assistantship. And in our experience in all these, what we have seen is that Indian students especially, they end up getting some sort of assistantship after the first semester. It may be just to cover their basic expenses, but they do end up getting some or the other type of assistance after the first semester. Indian students, they end up being very resourceful. Most of them end up being very resourceful, so they are able to manage that. The next type are the scholarships and fellowships offered by the universities. So scholarships are handed out based on merit. Now, difference between scholarships and assistantships is that for assistantships, you have to do something in return. You have to work for the university 20 hours per week. The 20 hours per week can be for teaching, for research, or for miscellaneous tasks. But you have to do something in return. But for the scholarships or fellowships, you don't have to do anything in return, right? So it is just given out based completely on merit, and merit means your combination of your academic scores and your GRE scores. If at the beginning, at the point of admission, if you're not able to get a scholarship, that's no problem. If you do well in your first semester, if you are in the top 5-10% of your class in the first semester, then also you become eligible from the next semester onwards, you become eligible for their scholarships, etc., etc. If you're applying for PhD degrees, it's very good. Most universities give 100% scholarships to PhD students. Getting admission for PhD degree is far tougher than getting admission in a master's program. But if you do manage to get an admission offer for a PhD program, there are multiple advantages. You get 100% scholarship. You automatically get an H-1B visa. So there are lots of advantages if you can manage to get an admission as a PhD student for a program, right? Okay. So now these are the different kind of different scholarships and financial aid programs available to international students when you apply to universities. Now, what factors, now you must be thinking that, all right, all these things are available. So on what factors do the universities base their decisions on? What can I do, right? So universities, before deciding, in order to decide, whether they should give you a scholarship or not, so they look at a few things. The first thing is that obviously you have to, your profile has to be good enough to get an admission. The first decision that the university takes is whether to give you an admission offer or not. Now, if they decide to give out 100 admission offers, let's say, then among those 100 students, they look at these factors to see now among these 100 students who should be getting the scholarships, right? So first of all, the first hurdle you have to cross is getting the admission offer, and then of course these things. What are these things? So it depends on the university. There are some universities where they do not give any kinds of scholarships or assistantships to international students. They are very, very clearly, it's mentioned on their website itself. So some prominent universities such as your University of Southern California, Carnegie Mellon, they are very, very clear that, unless you are exceptional, they are not going to consider giving assistantships or scholarships to international students. So look out for that, those kind of information. All of the information is available on the university websites. So if you are deciding on a university, do check, about their scholarships and assistantship policies concerning the international students, right? Next, it depends on the program also. Now, what I mean is that one of the universities which give out, quite a lot of, assistantships or scholarships is, let's say, Arizona State, right? So ASU. I mean, some of you might have heard about this. Arizona State University gives out quite decent amount of fee waivers or assistantships, etc., etc. But it's not common for all programs. So within Arizona State, if you apply for computer science, then you'll probably not, your chances of getting anything is very low. But if you apply for maybe, let's say, petroleum engineering or environmental engineering, your chances of getting a scholarship would be higher. Why? Because these degrees are not as competitive as a computer science or a mechanical kind of degree, right? So those of you who plan to apply for computer science degrees, it's a very high probability that you may not get any kind of assistances in most of the universities. If you have to get scholarships, or if you definitely want assistances, then you have to kind of compromise a little bit on the quality of college. But other programs, so now what do you do? So does it mean that you should not apply for computer science? So my recommendation is that instead of applying for a very, very common degree like computer science, if you apply for some lesser known programs where the competition is not tough, something like maybe software engineering. So it's also part of computer science, but people are not that aware that there are degrees available for that, or like network engineering, etc., etc. So go for some lesser known programs where the competition is not going to be that much. So these are some strategies that you can apply when you are selecting the universities and deciding on the program. Research work. Now I will elaborate a bit on the research work in the next slide. Your research profile is the most important thing, based on which universities decide whether to give you a scholarship or not. They are looking for strong academic record, right? So if your academic record is not good, if you have lots of backlogs, etc., etc., then you have to get a very good GRE score to compensate for that. Either your GRE score has to be high or your academic has to be better. If your academics and GRE score both are very good, then your chances of getting an assistantship or scholarship increases. A strong SOP. Now this is, we see this every year. Sometimes students genuinely have very good profile. They have done lots of research work. They participate in lots of industrial trainings, but they do a very bad job of presenting it in the statement of purpose. When you apply to any university, you will be writing a document called statement of purpose. Whether you apply to US or Canada or Germany, anywhere, you have to write up this document, right? Now, in this document, you have to literally market yourself to the universities. So the presentation of your achievements and accomplishments is very, very important. And as I said earlier, we have seen this multiple times. Students they have great profiles, but the presentation is just not good enough. It's not impressive enough. So when you get down to writing your SOPs, during the application process, make sure that you give yourself enough time. So writing the SOP just 2 days before the deadline is not a good idea. You should start writing your statement of purpose at least 1.5, 2 months before the university deadline. Do multiple iterations till you are completely sure that it is reflecting your profile in the best possible manner. So do keep that in mind when you get down to the final application process. Then the next thing is that this is very important. You have to get a TOEFL score of at least 100. For admission, most of the universities need an 80. So if you get an 80, so you will get an admission. But for scholarships, for assistantships and scholarships, the TOEFL score of 100 becomes very important. Um, if you get a research assistantship, it will involve doing a dissertation, doing research. You may have to write papers. So universities need to know that your English skills are good, right? For teaching assistantship, same thing. The university needs to know that your English comprehension, your ability to speak, your proficiency is good enough, right? Therefore, the TOEFL score plays an important role. So don't ignore your TOEFL exams. Whenever you take the TOEFL exams, make sure that you get 100. Networking with professors. Now, this plays a very important role. And of course, first of all, you have to have something to network about. But in multiple cases, we have seen this. Now, what is the networking? Does this mean? So what it means is that, after you have finalized, let's say, a list of 7 to 10 universities that you want to apply, or something, a list of universities that you are interested in, the next step would be to approach the faculty, of those universities. So go through the faculty list of the universities, find out which professors are doing research in the same domain in which you have some research work, let's say, then write to those professors, present your profile, strike up a conversation. Sometimes, if the professors like you, they decide to take you on and in their research groups, and then even the GRE becomes just a formality. So we have seen multiple cases of this where the professors, they are very keen to take the students in their research group, and then the university just says that you have to take the GRE because it's a mandatory requirement. What that means is that your score does not matter anymore, right? Because your research profile is so strong, and because a professor from that university has made up his mind to take you in his research group, everything else is not important anymore, right? So the networking with professors, this step is very, very important. So this is another reason why you should not wait till the last deadline date of the universities to apply to, right? So finalize your list of 7 to 10 universities 3 to 4 months before, and then start writing to the professors. Most professors don't reply to the very first email, so you may have to send a second round of emails. And so now during this time, this summer time, the faculty have more time, so this is the time when your chances of getting a reply from a faculty goes up, right? So August is when the fall semester would start in the US, and the professors get busy, right? So July, June, July, or maybe even beginning of August, that's the best time to start networking with the professors. Okay, so this is a very important step. There is a myth that only PhD students should network with professors, and that's a complete myth. Anybody who wants to project their research profile, anybody who is keen to get into a professor's research group, has to start networking as early as possible. Okay. Now, what is research work? I was telling you that research work. So your projects, as a part of your curriculum, you probably do a couple of projects, those projects, any kind of paper presentations, publications, industrial training that you may have done as a part of your curriculum, participation in seminars, conferences, paper presentation competitions, etc., even at the college or department level. Now, participation does not mean sitting in the audience, by the way. Participation means presenting something. Participation in activities of academic societies such as IEEE, CSE. Some of the colleges I know they have IEEE chapters, CSE chapters. So if you are and equivalent societies for mechanical or chemical or different all the even economics and all, they have these societies, student societies. So if you are members of these, you can manage to get something published in their magazines. So all of those come under research profile, right? Technical blog. Now see, if we see in India, the culture of research is quite actually poor. Except some of the IITs and some of the top NITs, most colleges don't have those facilities. Most Indian students don't have any publications at the bachelor's degree level. So what can you do now? So the next best thing is having a technical blog. It's like instead of you being able to publish something in an international or national journal, you are definitely writing the paper. You are definitely writing the paper. You have to do that. But in case you're not able to get it published anywhere, at least you can put it up on your blog, right? So this is the least that you can do. This is the least that anyone can do. Right? So even if you don't have anything yet, you can definitely start a blog. I use the word technical. Technical does not mean that it is related to engineering. Technical means that it is related to your field of study. If it's biology, then biology related. If it is I don't know, pharmacy, then pharmacy related. So write papers, continue to write papers. If you're not able to get them published, then at least have a blog. Okay. And during the online application form, you can give the URL of your blog on the form, and the university will see that you have written papers, you write. They will be able to assess your writing styles, etc., etc. Now, this is, as I said, the most important component. If this portion is strong, then your chances of getting scholarships and financial assistance increases like more than 3-4 times. Right? Now, what is a good SOP? Remember, I told you about that your SOP has to be good. So an SOP should tell a story. Okay, so content and flow are far more important than the language. Very often, students send me their SOPs, and when I read, I realize that they are just showing off their GRE vocabulary word list. They are not. It does not have any soul in it. There is no content, but yeah, lots of big words. So don't make the mistake of doing that. University, remember, Indians as graduate students, Indian students are number 2. Number 1 are Chinese. The maximum number of international graduate students are the Chinese, and their writing skills are very, very poor. So definitely a good SOP is not about writing very good language. It's more about how you are presenting your profile. So an SOP should address the following questions. What do you want to pursue? That means, what kind of master's degree do you want to do? Do you have the adequate academic background to pursue that degree? So this is where you write about your bachelor's degree curriculum, projects to prove your academic eligibility to pursue the course. This is where you can talk about any electives that you may have taken or any kind of industrial trainings, anything that you may have done related to whatever you want to study. Why are you applying to that university? Now, this is a question where most students miss out on. A lot of the SOPs, they cover these 2 points, but they miss out on this. Or even if they do write about this, they write some generic stuff like, because it's a because it has world-class faculty, it has cutting-edge technology. state of the art infrastructure, etc., etc. But see, these are very generic terms. If you can add the name of any university and the statement does not change. So the universities are smart enough to figure that out. Okay, so do some research and give specific reasons why you are applying to that university, right? So if this paragraph can be short, this paragraph can be just 3-4 lines also, but definitely it has to be university specific. So what you can do to make, what can you do to make this information university specific, right? You can name some courses that are being offered in that university that you want to take up as a part of your master's degree, name a few faculty in whose research group you want to work. And this is where, if you have been networking with the faculty, this is where you can mention those specific faculty with whom you are interacting with, right? And what happens is that when the application, the admission committee, when they go through your SOP and they see this, that, oh, you are already in touch with these 3 people. So your file goes to these 3 people saying that this person has finally applied, this person has applied, and you have probably been interacting with them. So the professors then, okay, I want the person in my research group. So they get the first pick in a sense, right? So this is where it helps a lot. Then the last portion is, why should the university admit you? Now, in most SOPs, this portion is completely missing. Students don't write about this at all. They write about these 2 things definitely, little bit about this portion. They definitely miss out about this point, right? So in why should the university admit you, you should talk about why you are unique. What is it about you that is different from other applicants? Or how are you different from your peer group, right? So this is where you talk about your career goals. How did that master's degree fits into your career goals? To talk about your strengths. If you have great extracurricular activities, right here, write that, that in addition to, you're being good at academics or having a great research profile, you are also good, a great multitasker, as demonstrated by this massive list of extracurricular activities that you have. So in this kind of manner, and this is where you can write about something personal also, anything personal. Maybe something is unique about your personal background. Maybe your father is like in the military or some central government employee, and you have got transferred like through multiple schools and colleges. So you can use that piece of information and say that that's why you have very high adaptability, you are culturally sensitive, and you will be able to adjust to the US environment and curriculum and everything easily, etc., etc. So find out something about yourself that sets you apart, and do mention it. That is where now this is the point which will set you apart from all the everything else is just data. Your marks, your GRE score, all of that is just data. The reason why universities make you write the statement of purpose is that they want to know you beyond that data. Okay, so do take that opportunity. This portion, don't forget to mention this portion. All right. So now this is you can feel free to take a screenshot of this screen, and when you finally start writing your SOP, do remember to cover these points. Okay. Networking with professors, as I said, very, very important. You should start from as soon as possible. You should have started it yesterday in a sense, So it significantly improves your chances of getting research assistantships. Go to the department homepage of the university that you want to apply, find a list of faculty. So once you have shortlisted about 7 to 10 universities, that's when of course you can get onto this activity. Go to the research areas of each faculty, pick 2-3 faculty whose research areas match your research interest. Now this is very important, right? Otherwise, what will you write about in the document? Okay, so now match your research interest. Now what are your research interests? Any kind of projects that that you have probably done, related to this guy's research areas, right? Email these faculty before applying and after applying. So before applying, you should definitely write it, I want to apply, etc., etc. And after applying, now when you write email the faculty after applying, then in the subject line itself, give your application number so that the faculty has more incentive to open your email, right? They probably get a lot of people writing to them, checking whether they should apply or not. But when somebody writes to them after applying, then they are, and I mean, they know that this guy seriously wants to come to this university. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, write the names of these faculty in the SOP for that university. Don't forget this step. So when you write to faculty after submitting the online application form, so yeah, as I said, include the application number in the subject of the email. Very important. Now, these are some steps. Probably it's a little too early for me to tell you about what to do after applying. But if you miss this out, then the all your hard work will go down the drain. Okay, so get onto the networking part as soon as possible. Okay, so now I have covered whatever I wanted to talk about: scholarships and financial aid, etc., etc. In case you haven't been able to manage to get anything, you have your admission offers, but you haven't got any scholarships or nothing. So now what do? Now you have to look for loan programs, obviously. So the Indian banks which give loans, different banks have different rates of interest, different caps, etc., etc. So one such bank which has been actually creating ripples in the Indian student community is Avance, right? So so here, can I request Priyank to tell us a little bit about Avance
Sure,
and
thank you very much.
programs available?
Sure, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Well, actually, this was a kind of an eye-opener for me. You know, my learning from whatever I heard so far, I can kind of sum it up in 5 words. You know, all of you intending to go to America for your education, get out of your comfort zone. I think that's my key takeaway from whatever Ozema has presented so far. Networking, very critical. Networking with your professors, researching, writing your SOPs. On the lighter side, getting away from the homemade food that your Indian mother is going to make. So all these things, get out of these comfort zone and start preparing yourself. From what I hear from a lot of students in the past, it's a beautiful journey. It's worthwhile taking all the efforts, all the hard effort that you're going to put into it. So with this, I would like to talk about Avance Financial Services. Can I put up my PPT? Could I share my screen? Ozema?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Yeah, cool. All right. So a little bit about Avance Financial Services. We are a 7-year-old Indian lender, primarily focusing into education loans and education infra loans. We have funded about 18,000 Indian students over the last 7 years. And we are primarily being held by 2 marquee investors, one being Warburg Pincus, 5th largest private equity player in the world, and International Finance Corporation, which is an offshoot of the World Bank. So that's a little bit about Avance Financial Services. So let me tell you, what is in store when you apply for an.
Priyank, sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak a little louder?
Of course. Am I betterly audible now? All right. So what can you expect when you apply for a loan with Avance Financial Services? Well, we fund 100% of your cost. So when I say 100% of your cost, I do not restrict myself only to a tuition fee component. With Avance, we can fund you not only for your tuition fees, We can also fund you for your travel expense, your insurance cost, and other miscellaneous costs, like you probably want to buy a laptop with a specific configuration. So it's a holistic way of funding you for your education purpose. We can sanction loans as quickly as 1 day. Yes, you kind of heard me right. We can sanction the loan in 1 day as well. We believe in a horse for a course kind of a thing. Being into this domain for about 7 years now, we kind of have a little understanding. We like to believe that we kind of have a little understanding of what an Indian student wants and what an Indian parent also wants when he or she is looking out for a education loan. So we have kind of customized our loan offering. So if you're going for a master's program in computer science to Arizona State University, vis-a-vis to you going for a law program with a Harvard, my offerings are customized to that extent. The repayment of your loan is flexible. We offer different repayment modes. I would not want to get into the depth of it at this point in time, but yes, when you consult with us one-on-one, we can get into those details. Doorstep service. Yes, the higher education loan can be delivered to you at your doorstep, at the convenience of your doorstep. We also have an entire digital mode taking into consideration today's scenario. So sitting from the comfort of your house, you can manage the entire loan application, right from submitting documents, actually getting the loan disbursed in a digital agile manner. We currently do not have any upper limit on our loan amounts. So we understand that while you apply to premium institutes, their loan amounts vary from speaking in INR terms. Some of these institutes goes to as high as 70 lakh rupees, 80 lakh rupees. Yes, we are more than happy to fund you for those kind of amounts as well. It's a very hassle-free and transparent process. We have a dedicated relationship manager who will be attached to your loan application throughout the entire journey at pre-sales, sales, and also at post-sales stage. So you are always welcome to reach out to us via email, telephone call, walking into our offices. Most of our offices, they serve you good tea. So please feel free to welcome. You're most welcome to walk into our offices. And the most beautiful part, I can give you a loan eligibility even before your letter has come in. So the moment you give your GREs, your TOEFLs, your GMATs, you can start applying for your education loan. We'll give you in principle sanction. We'll give you a loan eligibility at that very stage. So it kind of gives you a little flexibility. It also gives you a little bit of window that in case there is any kind of bridging in the gap needs to be done, you're giving a little more time to bridge that gap kind of a thing. So well, that's it from Avans. I have the contact coordinates of Jatin and Barka, who are our primary contacts as far as you're concerned. So you can touch base with them on the following contact numbers. You can also email them. Their email IDs are also mentioned. Well, that's it from Avans. Thank you very much. And I again wish you a fulfilling journey towards achieving your American education dream. Thank you very much.
So yes, actually the point that Priyank mentioned about the loan sanction letter, that is actually very, very important and very, very useful. Right? So when you apply to US university especially, so they will ask you to showcase their your financial ability. Priyank, you might want to stop sharing.
Yes, I am just doing that. Give me a second, please.
Right. So yeah, so they will ask you to show the financial, your status, etc., etc. They would want to know whether you can afford the education or not, and then they will send you the I-20, like that is the document based on which you apply for a visa. And same thing for UK, etc. also, after you get the admission letter, so they would want to see your finances. So the loan sanction letter that they give, which not your SBI, for example, which is not going to give you that. So the loan sanction letter, our students in the past have benefited a lot from that. So what happens is that, especially with US and Canadian education, it's a catch-22 situation with Indian banks. the Indian banks would want the admission letter to give you the loan, and the universities would want the document, the financial document to give you the admission letter. So it's a catch-22 situation. What do you know? Chicken and egg situation, literally, right? So that's where companies such as Avance, the fact that they do the assessment and give you a loan sanctioning letter, which is kind of like a commitment that if you get admission, blah blah blah, based on this, we think we can give you loans up to this much amount, and that helps you get the I-20, which is extremely beneficial for students. A lot of my students have actually used that, and they have given very good feedback. So Priyank, you guys have been doing doing a very good job, I must say. So thanks for that. So now, so Indian banks is one of your options, obviously. Next is that we have got financial institutions, international institutes basically, and they give what we call in Jamboree, we call them merit loans. I don't know whether that's a term or not, whether that's a technical financial language or not, but we call them merit loans. So Mayank, I would request you to come in here and talk a little bit about Prodigy here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Arima, for all the details. It was very, very insightful. And also thanks to Priyank for talking about Avance. Very impressed with the kind of work you guys have been doing. So kudos to that. On that note, let me start with a very small story. And this is a story about how Prodigy Finance actually started back in 2007, 2008 timeframe. So there was this South African gentleman who had got admission into INSEAD Business School. If you might know, it's one of the leading business schools in France. But just because he was an international student going into France, he could not secure a loan for himself. And because of that, he had to actually wait for 1 full year. He could not actually go in the year that he wanted to. He had to wait 1 year, manage all his loans and everything, and then eventually after waiting 1 year he got the admission that he had actually dreamed about. So when he went to the business school, he met a lot of international students there. INSEAD typically has, I think, more than 70% international. So over there he could actually speak to a lot of international folks and realize that the problem that he had faced was a genuine and a big problem. And that became the seed of the idea of Prodigy Finance. So right after the MBA, he basically formed the company Prodigy Finance, and the goal was to help international students, students like himself who were going to top schools and basically were unable to secure a loan. And to that point, the way we started was basically focusing around MBAs. We started onboarding top European business schools. INSEAD was our first school. Then we went on to onboard London Business School and the following. And then we largely followed the Financial Times FT100 ranking, onboarding the MBA schools one by one, starting from Europe and then moving on to the US. But as the company sort of moved along the journey, in the next 5 years or so, we figured that the masters, the MS STEM course is also facing a similar problem. And that's when we started looking at US very aggressively and started working with universities across that area, across that region, and onboarded them as well. But the philosophy over there was also similar. We wanted to only work with top schools. So the point that Arima was mentioning, merit-based sort of resonates, because till today, our philosophy is that we are funding only about 750 programs in the world. And these are all reputed and let's say well-ranked courses and universities. So that's basically the journey. In terms of, let's say, description of the product, it's a very, let's say, it's always been designed as an online product. Our process is fully online. We don't have branches, we don't have representatives who will basically work with you as a relationship manager. It is designed to be a self-service product. I mean, we believe that you are a strong smart individual, and we believe that you would be able to sort of manage this important piece of your journey on your own. And in that vein, we have also made sure that you don't have to sort of rely on your parents as co-signers, and you don't have to give collaterals, which is very typically the norm with at least Indian banks in India. So it's a collateral-free offering. It's a co-signer-free offering. All we need is an admit from a top school, and then you can actually go online and start your application. And within, let's say, 20 odd minutes, you have a quote from Prodigy Finance. And that quote will give you all the details of what the loan terms look like. Imagine if you have 5 admits from 5 different colleges, or if you're, let's say, waiting for one admit, but you have applied, or you're not even applied, you're just thinking about it, you can still start an application for that school in parallel. And for every school, you might end up getting a different loan term. Because what we look at is not your past. We don't look at your credit history. We don't look at your scores. We look at your future income potential. We know that you're going to a top school, and hence we work closely with all of our schools to understand what are the, let's say, typical salary levels that the students graduating from that schools get. And basis that, we analyze what could be your potential salary 2 years hence. And basis that, we give you a loan up to an amount which could be, let's say, 100% of cost of attendance, or maybe 80% of tuition fees. So that's the range. But yeah, I mean, completely digital process. You get your loan quote within 20-30 minutes. And then once you submit the original documents, which represent your budgets, your savings, we give you a formal loan approved letter, and then also give you the sanction letter, which is completely free of cost. Using the sanction letter, you can basically go in and get your visa done. And then only, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks before you actually start your studies, that's when you actually sign the loan agreement. So up till then, you have zero commitment. You have no, let's say, liability from our side. You can actually walk out if you change plans to defer your application to the next intake, or you want to go next year, or you want to completely cancel your study dreams. That's also fine by us till the point you sign the agreement. Once you sign, obviously, you are obligated, you are in the loan with us. And then obviously there is a repayment which starts after 30 months. Basically, your complete 24 months of study plus the 6 months grace period, which we allow you to sort of settle into your new job, kind of a thing. So that's a quick overview. Happy to take questions and address any kind of details that you might be wanting to delve in.
So thanks a lot, Mayank. And I think it's very early morning for you, right, in the US?
No, I'm in India actually. It's not early morning. That's why the power cut happened.
Oh, right. Okay. So actually, I had done a session with one of your colleagues, Rishabh Goel, last May. I don't know whether he's still around or not. And he was himself a London Business School graduate. And we had done a seminar, and it was really great. I mean, students really appreciated the fact, that you don't need to show any collateral. For the audience here, what collateral means is that, so in India, if you want 10 lakhs loan, so you have to show property worth at least 10 lakhs. Some of the banks want to see about 150% collateral. So what if your family does not have that property? So you may be a very bright kid who has got into a good college, but let's say your family does not have that much of property. So what do you do, right? So that's where Prodigy comes in. Prodigy is giving a loan to you and your future accomplishments, in a sense, right? So if you are good enough to get admission into a good college in one of the list, the 750 universities that Prodigy has, then it doesn't matter whether your family has that kind of property or not. You don't have to mortgage your father's house. The loan is given to you, and you don't need any co-signer. So that's something that is really, really empowering for a student. I mean, I have myself gone through the journey in this. I have done my master's. So during that time also, the whole tension of applying for an education loan, in a sense, the fact that your parents may be mortgaging their home, their land, and immense pressure on you. But what if you don't do well? So all of that, you don't have to go through. So so that in that case, you guys are doing a great job. So it's a great great concept. So thanks to you and your entire team. It's a great concept. The fact that you are giving the loan to the student and his future, not to his family background. So that's really empowering for the student. And yes, so anything else, Mike, you want to add?
I've just in the chat group I've pinged a link, which is like a bit.ly link for booking requesting a call back with us. So we have very limited slots. We have just 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, but you can speak to either me or my colleague Pritish. Just book a call with us, and we'll be happy to sort of answer your questions. It's a short call, 15 minutes duration, but hopefully we can address most of your queries in that time frame. So in case you want to also talk to us in the future, we are available.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. So in the loans, we are on to the loan segment. So some of you, if you have relatives or friends in the US who are green card holders, so they can be your co-signers, and you can take loans directly from US banks as well. So the rates of interest are far cheaper there. But yes, you need to have somebody with at least a green card to be your co-signer. So if that opportunity is there, then you can definitely take a loan directly from a US bank as well. Okay, so again, some of you joined late, so this session is getting recorded. We will send out the recording of the session by Tuesday, so you don't have to worry if you have missed out the initial portion. Those of you who are not Jamboree students, we will be happy to give you a demo class for GRE or GMAT, whatever you want. You can leave your number in the chat window, and we will get in touch with you. If you are a Jamboree student, or even if you're not a Jamboree student, and now you want us to assess your profile regarding what kind of chances you have to get a scholarship, or what kind of chances you have to get an admission in a college good enough so that you can become eligible for a prodigy loan, let's say. If you want us to do a profile evaluation for you, then please drop your number in the chat window. Write what you want from us, and then we'll definitely get back to you in the next 2-3 days. So while you do that, we are now formally opening the Q&A session. Do continue to post your phone numbers. We will get in touch with you. And in the meantime, if you have any queries, raise your hand. I will give you mic access, and you can ask your question. And please mention who the question is for. If the question is for Priyank, Mayank, or me, just mention who the question is for. All right. So the first person is Meghna Ray. So I'm enabling your mic. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Meghna Ray, if you are there.
Yes, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
My first question is to you. You mentioned about assistantship and, about getting an assistantship. So I wanted to know, you had also mentioned something about the in-state fees, and, once we get an assistantship, we are eligible to pay the in-state fees. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that, that as soon as we get an assistantship, do we start do we convert to an in-state fee, or what is the process, and how does that go?
So there is no separate application process for an assistantship. Your admission application form itself acts as the application form for an assistantship. So there is no separate application process per se. If the university deems you to be fit enough to be eligible for an assistantship, they will give you the assistantship, and automatically your fees would also be reduced to in-state level. So you don't have to do anything from your end.
Okay, so any assistantship we get in whichever semester, our automatically our fees gets converted to an in-state fees. That is what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and my second question is, what is the difference between cost of attendance and tuition fee?
Cost of attendance is tuition fee plus cost of living.
Okay, all right. And if we're applying for PhDs and we get 100% scholarship, do we get paid while we are doing our research, like while we are doing the
Yeah,
PhD?
you
Is
get
it?
monthly. You get a monthly stipend.
All right. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
All right. Supriya Shetake, you are next. Supriya Shetake, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Supriya, if you are there, you can unmute yourself. Okay, no. Veena Selvam.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Veena, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is my question is to you. Can you said something about applying for a PhD? Is it possible to apply for a PhD immediately after completing the undergraduate here in India?
Yes, in the US it is. If you are applying to the US, and if your bachelor's degree, if your academics have to be really strong, you have to be in the top 5% of your class, and you have to have a strong research profile. But you can apply directly for a PhD immediately after your bachelor's degree.
Okay, I have one more question to you. You said something about scholarships and assistantships. So if someone gets a scholarship, do they also qualify to get an assistantship?
So usually they are not clubbed together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Nirikta. I don't know again if I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrongly. Nirikta.
Hi. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so my question is to you. So the first thing that I would like to ask that, for example, you told us that we need a TOEFL score of at least 100. So I plan on applying to UK universities. So is there a like score for IELTS too?
See, IELTS 7.5.
Okay, 7.5. And another thing that you mentioned about the technical blog. So, is there like certain platforms that we can look at that we have to like write the blogs on those platforms?
WordPress and Google's Blogger. Both of these are free and they're quite good.
Okay. And just last question. That so you mentioned that we need to have a very strong academic record. So, like in case of UK, for the good colleges like Oxford and maybe LSE, so I'm looking at an MS in economics. So, what kind of a like, what is the threshold for that in my bachelor's to get
See,
a scholarship?
if you go to the website, they say upper first class. I think you might have seen the language, right? So
Yeah, which means more than 70%, right?
exactly, yes, and if you have a strong GRE score,
Yeah.
325 plus, that would also enhance your chances.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Anima, you are next.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, hi.
Ma'am, my question is to you again. Whatever you told, like all your participants, those who were there, I just want to ask that it is both for US and Europe and other continents as well, or because you were focusing about the US.
Yes, yes. Scholarships are much more abundant in the US and Canada. So whatever I was speaking was mostly, especially the whole assistantship part and all, they are applicable for US and Canada. In Europe, Australia, they give merit-based scholarships, but they don't have this concept of assistantships, etc., etc.
So you mean the assistantship is it's for the US only?
US, Canada, yes.
Okay. Thank you for this. And one more question: if somebody of my family member is already like he's doing a research from US only. So is it somehow beneficial for me? Although our fields are very different, he is doing in artificial engineering, and I'm from biotech background. So is it beneficial for me at any level?
See, if you apply to the same university, so in the application form, they have this question where they ask you, I mean, do you have any family member who's an alum or student of the university? You can, I don't know how close that family member is, so you can mention that. So it may not have a direct impact, but then no harm also.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Anuradha Das.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, Anuradha is my little sister. I'm her elder brother. She's not well, so I have joined in for her. I
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Yeah, sure.
I have two questions regarding. She has got an admission in London School of Economics like last Thursday,
Okay,
and
congratulations.
yeah. So, ma'am, I was just asking, like, is there any scholarships that I can apply, or I mean to say, we can apply after, like now, after getting an admission? Is the
Right,
first
go
question.
to see for UK, there are lots of there are quite a few external scholarships also. So if you go to the British Council website, you will see the list, and you will also see their the application process. So in UK they have this the thing of having external scholarships, which is not that common for US and Canada. So go to the British Council website, go to the list of scholarships. You will see the list of scholarships for which your sister would be eligible for, along with the application deadline and the application process.
Ma'am, actually, during the application, they asked me for a scholarship, and there is a graduate scholarship which LSE offers. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they mailed me that they won't be offering any scholarship this year.
Sure,
So
sure. Yeah.
I want to ask Mayank if like he will be able to help me with like the loan amount, loans and all.
Yeah, so we are in talks with London School of Economics. I think we are trying to figure out what all courses we can support for that particular school. So just write to us at info@prodigyfinance.com. We will update you in terms of the specific course that you are looking at, if that is supported or not, and maybe also give you some kind of a guideline in terms of how much time it might take to get them onboarded.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Rania Vrunda. Rania Vrunda. Rania Vrunda, if you're there.
Madam, is it audible, madam?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
I am the father of Frunda Rania. I am from the Gujarat Navsari, if you heard that. Actually, Vrunda has completed the BSc Medical Technology from Veer Narmad Gujarat University, and currently running MSc Medical Technology, specialization with clinical laboratory at Symbiosis International University, Pune.
Okay.
Now, actually, it is running, and she is going to complete in 2021, March 2021. And she is keen interested in doing again Master of Science in USA in the specialization of forensic science. So, is it possible, ma'am?
Yes, it is possible, but why not a PhD?
That is why I am confused, so much confused.
Why don't you? I'll give you. Sabyasachi, can you type out your email ID? So, why don't you ask your daughter
Yeah,
to
sure.
email her profile to us? We'll see whether she can do directly a PhD in forensic sciences instead of doing another master's degree.
That is why I'm taking your suggestion, because BSc already completed, masters are going to complete. So also I am also prepared for the PhD in forensic science. Is it good?
Yeah, it is definitely good.
And the Indian credits, course credits, subject wise credit rata, is it valid for the PhD?
We have to check. In India, different universities have different things. So I am not aware of the curriculum of your daughter's university. That's why I'm asking my colleague to drop his email ID so that you can email, so that your daughter can email her curriculum to us. Then we can kind of go through and then decide.
Okay, ma'am. And one more thing, ma'am. I already applied for the World Education Services New York for the degree equivalency on the basis of Bachelor of Science. So is it calculated equivalent?
Yes. See, she will be applying only after she completes the master's degree. I think she's eligible. She has done a 3-year bachelor's degree, and she is currently in, she have completed the first year of master's degree, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, she's eligible. You did not actually have to spend so much money with the WES evaluation, you know.
Okay, due to Corona, it is held up in between anywhere by speed post actually. But
Yeah,
I will be contact with you. Actually, she has given me this your contact of Jambori. Right now, she is busy with her online classes of symbiosis,
sure,
and
sure,
I am attending. Actually,
sure, sure, sure.
actually, she was visited your Jambori classes at Pune, I think, at
Okay.
Jackson Gymkhana.
Oh yeah, yeah. But currently that is in the containment zone, so we are not open, obviously.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, so I will be in contact with you, ma'am.
Right, right. Sure. All the best.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks. Namrita. We have a Namrita.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So my question was, if you have a lot of work experience, does that work against you when you try to apply for, say, a scholarship or any kind of financial aid?
So, what do you mean by a lot? Because that is very subjective. Also,
I
are
mean,
you planning to apply for a master's degree or a PhD degree?
for a master's, I don't mean a lot by any, but just like from an average standard of the applicants. Um, I would say it's probably higher than an average student who applies for a course in the US per
What kind
se
of
for a
master's
master's.
degree? What master's degree are you planning to apply for?
Probably for an MBA.
Oh, MBA. See, if it's like 14 plus, then it sometimes becomes a problem.
Okay.
But anything 8, 9, 10, also fine.
Okay. So I mean, is it a problem with the universities or with the
With the
at
university.
with the universities? Okay.
Like for example, in INSEAD, you cannot apply if you have more. So there are universities have some upper limit cutoffs, but not like less. So it's less than 10, then you don't have to worry.
Okay. And what about is the age factor as well any kind of consideration?
No, no.
Nothing like that. Okay. So like I'm bordering somewhere around 11 years of work experience.
Okay.
Which is why I had this question.
Right, right, right. But no, I think in the upper limit of some colleges 14 years, but but
Okay.
that's also a handful. See, what happens is that what we tell students is that if you I mean, you have to look at your current CTC,
Right.
will you get that kind of value add. So that's the questions we ask students, that if you are currently earning a 40 50 lakh salary, let's say, then
Okay.
I would not recommend you to do an MBA, because after the MBA you are not going to get any kind of massive upgrade on your
Yeah.
salary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thing that we recommend students.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we'll take two more questions. We are almost out of time. In the meantime, I really apologize if I haven't been able to answer your questions. But if you leave your number in the chat along with the question, then we can leave your phone number and the question, and we'll get back to you. Also, if you want a demo class or a profile evaluation, you can leave your number. We will arrange those for you as well. So the Harsh Agarwal will take your question.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, Harsh.
Ma'am, my question is to you. What is the suitable time for applying for GRE exam and for university to take admissions?
So you will be finishing your degree next year?
No, ma'am. I will finish my degree in 2021.
Yeah, that is next year, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you are currently you will be beginning your final year, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So usually we ask students to take either in third year or beginning of fourth year. Because in the fourth year, the students get busy with their final year projects and campus recruitments and all of that. The GRE exam is valid for 5 years. So, and the difficulty level is 11, 9, 10th, 11th level. So you can actually take it in the first or second year of your engineering also. So the good time, a comfortable time is that, you should take it now. You should take it like before September, I would say. If your program will be starting, your master's program will be starting August of next year. For that, the university deadlines will happen this year. The online applications will be available from end of August, and the admissions are given on a first come first serve basis. That means if they get good applications in the beginning, they will start giving out admission offers. So you should definitely not delay your GRE exam beyond September. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So last question of the day. Let's say Saksham Garg.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good
Ma'am,
evening.
my question is that I have a gap year after my 12th. So does that add up to my application?
It does not matter. In India, 30% of the students have a gap year after class 12. So that's no problem at all.
So it doesn't have any repercussions with respect to my
No, no.
application or and selection.
No, no.
So, and one more thing with respect to that, do I have to explain it in my SOP about that gap year, that why I had it or anything like that?
In the online application, they don't ask you anything about your schooling. They just ask you about your bachelor's degree. So you don't have to write anything, explain anything that you have done before before the start of your bachelor's degree.
But that does count. That is presented, I guess.
No.
That gets represented after if I have in my CV or whatever application I will
See, unless it is like a 3-4 year gap, so 1 year gap is not something that you would that you should be explaining, and it does not have any negative impact. In India, sometimes we get students who have gap years of 2 years, 3 years because they were preparing for IITs and etc. etc. So
The same case
that's fine.
was with me, that I was preparing for medical exam.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I ended up with the biotech as engineering subject. But anyway, so that's why I was asked.
Right. No, that will not have any, and you should not actually be on the defensive about that. You should not try to explain that. You should rather focus on the positives in your profile.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's all for today. I really apologize if we haven't been able to take all your questions. Do use the the chat window. Post your phone number along with your questions, and we'll get back to you. And in case you want a free GRE or GMAT class or a profile evaluation session, also leave your numbers. If you have already done that, then you don't have to do it again, right? So Priyank, any parting thoughts, any recommendations, any advice for our attendees?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for asking. I think this is the way it is important for you to evaluate yourself with the on your academic side. Do give it a thought to also assess yourself on the financial side of it. We Indians tend to have this habit of assessing our finance side of it at the very last moment. Go to Prodigy, go to Avans, but get yourself assessed one. And good luck to you. Good luck to everybody on this journey. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Priyank. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for being with us for 1.5 hours. Really appreciate it. Mayank, any parting thoughts, advice, anything for our students?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I think my advice would be that it's basically a long journey, and try to enjoy every step of the process. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of things that you have to go through, starting from the exam that you have to take to the application process and everything. But once you get there in a country like a US, it's an amazing experience. Try to basically make the maximum use of it. Try to always, as Priyank had mentioned earlier, continue to be out of your comfort zone, right? When you go to the US, you tend to then also hang out with just Indian friends. That's not the right thing to do, right? When you're there, try to meet and mingle with other nationalities, try to understand their perspective, where they are coming from, and very actively, rather proactively, continue to network, right? What US citizens are very strong at in general is that they are very vocal, they are very good at networking, and that's where Indian and Chinese students sort of fall back, right? So US is all about showcasing your skills, your experiences, and being very vocal. And as Indians, it does not come naturally to us, given that obviously there is also a language barrier. So work on those aspects. It's a very fulfilling journey, and it's a life-changing journey. So whatever are the hardships, be it with regards to loan or everything else, it will all fall in place. Don't worry, we are there to help. So I mean, you'll be fine.
Thank you very much, Mayank. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights with us. And I hope all of you, all the attendees, I hope you learned something new. Once again, I appreciate your presence. Have a great weekend. And at any point of time, if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, everyone.